Right, welcome back. Now, in the last few videos, we've talked a bit about different data types, variables, and although I've given you some examples, I appreciate they're really tricky concepts to get your head around. So I just want to take you through a particular no-code tool called Adalo, show you how this might work in terms of building a mobile app, how some of the data types work, etc. And hopefully just give you a bit more of a concrete idea of how this works. Now, I'm going to fly through this interface a little bit. I've got the default setup here of a sign up screen, login screen, home screen. I'm going to move myself out the way up here because a lot of the work I'll be doing is on the left, but I'm going to fly through this. Don't worry so much about what Adalo is doing in a tool. We've got a fantastic set of basic videos that will talk to you about Adalo in more detail and how it works. But really the idea of this particular video is just to show you the variables themselves, and you'll learn a little bit about Adalo, but that's less important. So we're going to be discussing variables, we're going to be discussing strings, numbers, booleans, and I'm going to show you how to make an array when an array is not supported out the box, because Adalo doesn't really support an array as a field type. So we'll talk a bit about what that means, where you can use it. So I'm actually going to try and build the example from my slides where I said when the user logs in, imagine them popping up saying hello name. So what happens here is I've dragged a text component in. I'm just going to say hello, and then I want the next part to be a variable. Now every no-code tool is going to do this a wee bit differently, but with Adalo, we've got this concept called magic text, and what magic text will do is give me access to all the available variables or formulas that I've got for me. Now, typically what you're going to see in a no-code tool is usually it'll have a way to reference. If you're trying to pull out a piece of data about a variable, so let's say I want to show someone's name, it's going to have a way for me to figure out what name I want to show. And the vast majority of the time, the data that I want to use is going to be related to the user who's currently logged into the app. And when I say currently logged into the app, I don't mean right now when I'm building it, I mean later when the app's running and somebody is using it. So when this says logged in user, it means the user who will be logged in at the time of use. And this is this concept, I think I mentioned it earlier, but there's a very different concept between your app and development time, as we call it, and then your app and runtime, i.e. when it's running, when someone else is using it, what's actually happening. So we're clearly in development time at the minute, we're building through this. So we've got a few options here. We've got email, password, username, full name, created date, updated date. Well, where do they come from? Let me show you. So if I go into Adalo's database on the side, I've got users, and I can immediately see, so in Adalo, a table is called a collection, and then a field is called a property. As I mentioned, every no-code tool has got a different name for it. Whenever you see property, you might also see the phrase attribute. But if I click into my records, you can see I've already set up two of my accounts. So I've set up one with the name John, which is just my default go-to name. It's very popular here in Scotland. And I've set one up with Niall, which is my name. And you can see suddenly the fields up here are going to look, sorry about that, very familiar. You've got email, password, username, full name, created date, etc. So again, let's go back to that text. We can pull out the full name as a variable. So now it's just going to show up here as full name, because remember what I told you about a variable? A variable is a placeholder that says, in the future, I want to use a piece of data. I roughly know what that data is. It's going to be the full name. I just don't know exactly what that name is yet, because I don't know who's going to be logged into my app at any particular time. So let's go ahead and see what happens when I preview that. Now what this does is just let me play with the app on my own browser, on my own computer, on my own screen. And it's going to log in and say hello Niall. You can see in the background it still says hello full name on the actual app builder, but in the app itself I've logged in as Niall, and therefore it says hello Niall. I'm just going to show you what happens when I log into my other account. So I already have an account, and it is Niall plus test and do, and we're going to log in, and this will come up as hello John. So you can see that just maps exactly to what we had in the database with each account. Niall plus test and 2 is John, and the one I was logged into before is Niall. So really cool. Hopefully you get the idea immediately how a variable works, but let's take it a little bit further and also start working with some other data types. So imagine we wanted to use the user's name. We want to say the current user is age, yada yada yada, and imagine we also want to say the current time is, so we're going to add a few bits of details here. Now you could do them as whatever you want, but it just gives you an idea of some things you might see when logging into an app. So we kind of have a couple of problems here. Number one, how do we get the current time? Well, actually, tends to be no-code tools will make several things available by default. They're not necessarily saved in a database, but they are available. A really common one is the current time, because in a lot of apps, in order to make stuff work, you need to be able to get the current time, the current date, that kind of thing. So if I actually go back into my menu here of available different variables for Adalo, I've got a few options. I've got all those logged in user ones we talked about. I can even count everybody who's in my users database, but I've got this date and time here, and so I've got all sorts of times that I can specify, but I'm going to specify the current time. Now, something a bit weird will happen if I just log straight in and look at that. It's going to give me something, but not what you expect. Take a wee look. So you've got a few seconds ago. Now, if I go and hit this little edit button here, because the current time is a few seconds ago, and that doesn't make a whole amount of sense. So let's look here. Well, it's actually saying I've got a few options. I can specify the relative time, i.e. 10 days ago. I can specify the date. I can specify the current time is whatever day of the week. But I actually want to use the time itself, and that says, let's just go and see. So right now it's 14:45, middle of the afternoon. And it says the current time is 14:45 in the middle of the afternoon. So you can just see how that works. But let's go back to that age, because we've got a bit of a problem there, right? Which is we don't know the user's age. I don't have a field for that. So let's go and create one. Now, these options are going to look immediately familiar if you have had a look at that lesson previous around about numbers, text, true, false, date, time, etc. Now, as you all know, age is just a number. So let's put age in. Let's save that, and what we're just going to do is set up a variable there. So we'll just close our database screen, and let's just set up our variable. So we're going to go back to Adalo's magic text, Adalo, whatever you want to call it, and now you'll see we've got this option for age in here. Now, oops, that's not come up where I wanted it to go. Let's try that again. Okay, there's a quirk in the interface. What I'm just going to do is just delete that. Now, apologies, I'm using Safari, which occasionally breaks lots of brilliant no-code tools. Oh well, it's popping up there. So we'll do that, and what you're going to imagine, so we've got the current kind of user's age. You can see I'm kind of desperate trying to make that go back. There we go, I got it working. I'm not sure why that was happening, probably something I've done, and we'll just fix that. But the current time is, but you can see what I've done there is I've put the age. So what you would be expecting is the minute I go and hit that preview button again, it's going to come up and it's going to tell me the user's age. So let's do it. And it's missing, and the reason it's missing, as I feign shock and surprise, is because we don't actually know the user's age yet. We've not asked them for it, so although we've specified it, so the variable does exist, we haven't actually specified what the age should be. We never asked the user, because we added this in after we created this data, so we've not actually asked them their age. And so what we have here from the previous slides is a great example of an empty variable. The variable is there, but we don't know what it is. So what we are going to do at this stage is we're going to put in what we call a form. Now again, this isn't really about learning Adalo itself, so don't worry too much about the component and what it does, but essentially a form is a way for a user to input. And there we go, there's my form there. It's a way for a user to input information that then goes straight into a database, or goes somewhere else. In Adalo, it goes straight into the database. And so it's going to ask me what data collection I want. In other words, what data table do I want? I'm going to hit users. What do I want the form to do? Well, I want it to update the current logged in users information. And then I've got all these fields. You'll immediately recognise these from the database. Now, I don't want to update their email, I don't want to update their password, username, full name, but I do want to update their age. So I'm going to add this field in. I can give it a little placeholder. I could say enter your age. I can say it's required. Boom, there we go. So we're going to come away from that, and what we just want to happen now is when I hit that, it's going to put their age in. So let's preview it. Hi John, current user is age, don't know your age. Well, I'll just tell you it's 25, update user, and bang, there you go. So immediately you can see how that variable has worked. Now, importantly, as you know, as I pointed out, I have not linked this user to that variable. What I've done is I've not linked that user form to that variable. What I've actually done is link it to the data collection. So if I go in the data collection and I look, John is now 25, but Niall still doesn't have an age. So you can kind of see how that works and how you can add information that can then be stored and displayed later within a variable. And I mentioned that quite often a variable is used to store data. Well, there's a great example. We've got an age variable, it stores the age, it puts it in the database, and then it shows up again. So let's play with another couple of data types. So we talked about true and false. True and false is a Boolean data type. It's a yes or no, and we're just going to say, is the user happy? Now, there's a couple of things to point out about the way I'm naming this. Number one, I mentioned obviously, I think on the very last slide, that to me it's important to not have too many spaces and things like that. You know, we've got one there with full name, but it's important to try and avoid spaces and stuff in your variables, because it makes a lot of sense at the start, but when you're, you know, like a couple of years into a no-code project or a few months in, like, it's going to get complex, it's going to get complicated. If you're working with APIs, they usually replace spaces with underscores anyway. So this is just the way I like to work. You don't have to do it. You could just write, is the user happy with normal spaces. It's entirely up to you, but it's just my personal advice. The other thing that worth pointing out here is, if I am designing a Boolean data type and it is due to be a yes or no question or a user preference, I tend to write it as a question. So rather than saying happy, yes or no, I'll say, is the user happy? Because when I'm then working with that data field, it makes it really easy to say it out loud. Is the user happy? That should be true, therefore I should set it up like this. You know, it just, writing it as a question is a good way to really internalize that idea of this is a yes or no answer, it's a true or false, you know, and just kind of, for me, it helps bring it to life a little bit. So we're going to change our form because we want to now be able to capture, is the user happy or not? And the reason that we want to do that is because, again, we don't have it in our database. You know, yes, okay, we've got it as a column, as a field, as a variable, but we don't know if the user's happy because they've not told us yet. So let's go ahead back into our runtime. And is the user happy? I'm going to tick yes this time. I'm going to update my age to 26. Time is moving quickly. And I'm going to hit update user. You can see the age has changed to 26. We've not had the is user happy thing show up, so I'm just going to go to records, and you can see it now has a big tick. Now quite often you'll get, it will say true, it might say false, might say yes, etc. It can also have just a big tick, or, you know, be blank. Sometimes you can get an X as well. Now the important thing is, you might be saying, okay, let's show here if the user's happy. It's not as simple as that, because I didn't ask them if they were happy and get a yes or happy. I got a tick. I can't just display a tick. Typically what you would have is another piece of text. I'll see if I can do this in Adalo. I wasn't intending to show you because I've not played with it myself recently. But typically what you can have is a kind of, let's say the user is happy. You can have a piece of text which only shows up if a Boolean field is true or false. So I can do change visibility, and I can say this is sometimes visible. So this bit should sometimes show up if the logged in user, is the user happy, is true. So I can say this little bit of text here should only show up if the logged in user is happy. And I'm just going to do a wee change here to show you. So in this field, I'm just going to make sure that we have the option to untick that field. Let's see if that all works. Let's go and preview. So the user, by the way, we've already set as happy, so it should show up. And there you go, the user's happy. It's not the most beautiful looking, but there you go. Now let's update it. And it disappears because now the user's not happy. Let's tick again and say he's happy. Update, boom, it's back. So you can see how that's more of a conditional. Now, conditionals we sometimes call if statements. We're going to talk about them in the workflows part of the lessons. So don't worry about that too much, but it just gives you an idea of how that works. And lastly, I just want to give you a quick example of me building a list. Now, let's say for our users, we want to have a collection of, let's say we want to have a list of milestones. I've completely pulled that out of thin air. We're going to have a name for the milestone, and we can then just have another little form. Oh, and one other thing we need to do in that is we need to actually link our milestone. So we're going to have milestones, and by milestones I mean, like, I don't know, has the user had their 18th birthday, 25th birthday, have they bought their first home, bought their first car, just a random, very typical Western idea of milestones. And we're going to do a relationship, and we're going to do a relationship to the user. So let's look at our chart. Now this chart should look really familiar when we went through our relationships lesson. This is kind of what we played about with. So a user can have multiple milestones, but a milestone belongs to one user. That sounds correct, because if I bought my first house, I bought that, not someone else. And I can have multiple milestones. I might buy my first house, marry someone, get a car, etc. So that makes a lot of sense. A user can only have one milestone. Nope, that doesn't make sense. A milestone can have multiple users. That doesn't make sense either. So we're just going to hit done, and we're just going to create save, and then we're just going to do another wee form. Now let's see if we can squeeze all of that onto the page. In fact, I might just delete this one. We don't really need it anymore. But what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that you can use this table not only to create a relationship, clearly, but you can use this as a way of having an array or a list. So this user now has a potential list of their milestones. We just need to fill that out. So we're going to add a form, and we're going to drag that form over here. We're going to connect that to milestones, and we're going to create a new milestone every time we fill this field out. Now there's a couple of interesting things we can do here. It's come up saying set automatically. So this is automatically going to say that the user related to this milestone I'm about to create is the one who's logged in. Again, it's a nice wee Adalo thing. You don't have to worry about it too much. Instead of name, we're just going to do milestone, enter the milestone. We've got that. And what I'm just going to do as well is delete my variables up here. I just want to create some kind of clear space. In theory I could start making new screens and stuff, but again, I just want to make this quick and easy. Now I'm going to bring in a list. A list is going to let me display an array. What is this a list of, or what is this an array of? It's an array of milestones, and I can do a little filter here. And again, we're starting to get a little bit complex. A lot of this we're going to explain. This is what we call a repeating data list, and we are going to, we actually have a full lesson on them because they're a pretty important part of no code, pretty complicated. But now what we can see is, regardless of how I've done it, don't worry about that. What I've essentially said is, this is going to let me add things into my table, which is my kind of stand-in for an array, and this is going to let me display each of those milestones. Let's go and see if it works. Now chances are I've set up quite a lot there, so I might have configured something slightly wrong, but let's just play with it and see what happens. So right now there's no list because there's no milestone, and you can see in this list in the background, this kind of demo one, it says milestone name, milestone name, milestone name. It's just generic because it doesn't know what the milestone is yet. It's a placeholder, it's a variable. So we're going to enter the milestone, got first house, and suddenly it appears. We got first car, suddenly it appears. Filmed a no code video in one take, which trust me is an achievement. Create milestone, there you go. So you can kind of see how this works, immediately as I start putting milestones in, they're going to appear in that list, and as I go into my database, they're going to show up there. So if I had a recipes table, again I could do my whole ingredients through that. I've got the 3 milestones. As I click them, it's going to let me go in and see them, and you can see that immediately looks a little bit like the Airtable interface. So that's all I wanted to show you. In terms of some of the other data types in there, like integer and decimal, for example, aren't dealt with in Adalo. It just makes them all a very simple number, as we saw with our age, so you don't need to worry about that. In terms of objects, we're going to look at them in probably an API lesson because that's where they're most prominent. Don't worry about them too much on here, and Adalo doesn't at the minute support them anyway. So have a wee play about with that. I absolutely recommend if you have a look on the website, you'll find a link to Adalo. We'll get you in there, have a little bit of a play around with it, try this out for yourself, experiment with it. As I say, different no-code tools are going to be different, but this is a really great example of how it works. Thank you very much, and we will speak to you again soon.